Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into exactly how a regional geopolitical conflict in the Middle East is sending massive shockwaves through the entire global aviation industry. Let's get right to it. To really understand how a localized conflict can upend a truly global industry, we've got to look past the daily political headlines. So, we're going to strictly focus on the logistical and economic facts, both on the ground and, honestly, more importantly, up in the sky. This crisis is hitting airlines in three very distinct, concrete ways: airspace closures, mounting operational challenges, and drastically increasing fuel prices. It's like a massive ripple effect, right? It squeezes profit margins and, as you've probably noticed if you've flown recently, it creates absolute chaos for passengers. Here's our roadmap. We're looking at the initial shock to aviation, closed skies and reroutes, the jet fuel spike, global operational nightmares, and finally, the financial bottom line. Part 1. The shock to aviation, a fragile ceasefire, and global ripples. Right now, we're looking at a pretty fragile ceasefire between the US and Iran. But because of unresolved maritime pressures and ongoing nuclear disputes, the aviation industry is basically stuck on high alert. The thing to remember here is that the Middle East is a vital transit hub. It links Europe, Asia, and Africa together. So any localized disruption there, it instantly becomes a global economic problem. There are a few specific catalysts driving this. We're seeing U.S. troop deployments exceeding 50,000, Iranian targeting of oil and LNG infrastructure, and Houthi rebel threats down in the Bab el-Mandab Strait. Regardless of the politics involved, these facts severely threaten the region's stability. It dramatically increases the perceived risk and forces airlines to make immediate, sweeping changes to how they operate. Moving to Part 2, closed skies and reroutes. Navigating narrow corridors. The absolute most immediate impact we're seeing is the literal closure of the sky across 10 different Middle Eastern countries. With major transit hubs completely blocked off, airlines have no choice but to squeeze their international traffic through two very narrow, incredibly congested choke points, the northern route and the southern route. So let's compare those two options. The northern route funnels traffic through the Caucasus and Afghanistan. That brings high risks of severe weather or equipment malfunctions. The alternative is the southern route, which traverses Egypt and Saudi Arabia, but that one suffers from intense congestion and massive delays. Honestly, it's a no-win scenario. The crucial takeaway here is that both of these alternative routes drastically increase flight times, fuel burn, and just the overall network complexity of getting a plane from point A to point B. 56 million. Think about that for a second. That is the staggering number of annual visits transiting or originating in the Middle East that are currently at risk of disruption or just flat-out cancellation. We're talking about a massive volume of human movement suddenly thrown into complete logistical gridlock. Section 3. The jet fuel spike. Supply chain choke points. Now, those longer routes we just talked about, well, they naturally require a lot more fuel. And that brings us to the second major crisis. The price of that fuel is skyrocketing. The aviation choke points up in the sky are being perfectly mirrored by petroleum supply chain blockades down on the ground and at sea. Just look at how fast this played out. The U.S. strikes Iran in late February. By early March, the Strait of Hormuz is effectively blockaded. Within week 1, jet fuel prices spike 81%. And by mid-March, those prices have more than doubled. It is a stunning, immediate surge in operating costs that hit the airlines almost overnight. And here's exactly why that price doubled so incredibly fast. Tanker traffic completely collapsed, going down 70 to 80% in the Strait of Hormuz. Keep in mind, that waterway normally carries 20% of all global oil. On top of that, the conflict wiped out roughly 50% of the Gulf states' refining capacity. With the sudden loss of so much regional refining capability, other regions simply can't ramp up production fast enough to replace that much needed jet fuel. It's just a total cascading breakdown of the supply chain. Which brings us to Section 4, Global Operational Nightmares, the cost of doing business in the sky. All of these airspace closures and fuel shortages are culminating in a massive logistical nightmare for carriers all over the world. We're talking more than 50,000 flights canceled or impacted since this conflict began. It's severely damaging airline reliability and stranding passengers everywhere. So if your recent international connection turned into a 24-hour nightmare or your vacation got inexplicably delayed, well, this is likely why. Let's break down who's getting hit the hardest here. Gulf carriers are seeing their global hub operations severely restricted, forcing them to reduce scheduled flights by 20 to 25%. Meanwhile, Any airline that relies heavily on Europe to Asia routes, they're facing astronomical cost increases of up to 80% because of those extended routings. I mean, that is a massive hit to take. And Indian and Turkish airlines are facing heavy disruption too, simply because of how close their gateways are to the conflict zone. But listen, fuel and longer routes aren't the only costs going up right now. Airlines are actually paying 6 to 7 times more for per round-trip insurance premiums on jets flying near the region. 6 to 7 times. It's an incredible compounding expense just to safely keep these massive machines in the air. Section 5. The financial bottom line, from global skies to company balance sheets. Finally, let's zoom in from that 30,000-foot global macro level and see how this translates directly into the financial statements of a domestic airline. Take Southwest Airlines, for example. Despite actually increasing their second quarter operating revenue, Southwest suffered nearly $900 million in additional fuel expenses year over year. $900 million! That is a staggering blow to profitability, driven largely by this geopolitical fuel shock. Because of this massive fuel expense, their Q3 earnings guidance came in remarkably light. They guided for adjusted earnings of 50 to 75 cents per share, which fell pretty far short of the 82-cent Wall Street estimates. To put that into perspective, it brilliantly illustrates how a fuel shock originating thousands of miles away in the Middle East directly erodes domestic profitability right here at home. As Southwest CEO Bob Jordan highlighted, their core business might actually be strong, but as he put it, that's, quote, despite nearly $900 million of additional fuel expense. Unlocking their full earnings potential now requires really aggressive cost management and network optimization just to survive this fuel shock. It goes to show that even the most well-run airlines are ultimately at the mercy of global fuel prices. Which brings us to our final takeaway. As weaker competitors face mounting financial pressure and new airline entry falls to multi-decade lows, we really have to look at the big picture here. Knowing that bankruptcies historically spike during economic shocks, we've got to ask, is the global aviation hub model fundamentally broken in an era of geopolitical instability? Will this conflict permanently reshape how the entire world flies? It's a fascinating question, and honestly, it's one the industry is going to be forced to answer in the coming months. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I hope it gave you a much clearer picture of the skies ahead.